Welcome, everybody, to the Third and Gold podcast. I'm Tyler James, and I'm joined, as always, by the one and only Eric Hansen. Together, we cover Notre Dame football, recruiting, and more for blueandgold.com on the On3 network. The latest turns in the coaching carousel have resulted in Notre Dame replacing two more assistant coaches on the defensive side of the ball as the calendar shifts now to February. While we start to think about spring football and the NFL draft, it's also a good time to revisit Notre Dame's ongoing recruiting efforts. And who better to discuss that with than the man who never stops thinking about recruiting, longtime recruiting analyst Tom Lemming. Tom, thanks for joining us.
My pleasure, Tyler.
Tom, just to start, I guess, how would you describe the losses of Mike Mickens and Al Washington's in terms of their impact as recruiters?
Well, Mickens is the best DB recruiter Notre Dame's ever had. I've been doing this for 48 years, but I followed it for like 60, and they never had anybody in the secondary that could recruit secondary players like Mike Mickens, and he's going to be a very difficult loss. But as I told Eric yesterday, I was sitting with Jarrard, the former Notre Dame quarterback at Cardinal Mooney in Sarasota 2 days ago, and out of the blue, we were talking about recruiting coaches. He said, "Well, the best one we've had here is the Illinois DB coach who's now coming to Notre Dame." So looks like they pulled a good one with getting Mickens. And I know Charlie Partridge, and Charlie had always been a good recruiter, Iowa State, Pitt. So I think that's a good sign because Notre Dame's always needed defensive tackles. They really haven't gotten any 5 stars or guys that could be impactful. I think that's what's always held them back from national titles, a pass rush from the inside. And I think maybe Charlie's a guy, we'll see if he's a guy. Al really didn't do it, and Mike Elston didn't do it either, bringing in the impactful defensive lineman. I mean, guys that can beat Navy or Wake Forest, Duke. But I mean the guys that can beat Ohio State or Alabama or Georgia, schools like Texas A&M, schools like that in Miami. You need a really impactful defensive line from one side to the other. And that's, I think, what Notre Dame's been lacking. So hopefully, and I know Al Washington did a good job bringing in Dunham, and I think Itawade will be a good one in the long run, but we'll see.
Tom, when you're out on the road talking to kids, do they bring this stuff up? Do they say, "Oh my gosh, Mickens has left"? Do they ask you about the new coaches, or do they just know who Marcus Freeman is and what the logo looks like?
It's a good question because, yes, they know Mickens. Matter of fact, I ran into the top player probably in the Carolinas. He was a corner from South Carolina. Now he's moved over to Huff High School, and his name's Dotson, and Joshua Dotson. I was talking to him for a long time. He loved Mickens. So now we're talking, and Notre Dame's dropped out of his top 3. So, and NIL plays something to do with it too, but it took them a while to replace Mickens. It looks like they got a good guy coming in, but I thought, Notre Dame was probably leading because of Mike Mickens and his reputation that he's acquired over the past couple of years as a coach, but also recruiting big-time ball players. He's had Watts was close. I don't know. He might be Rookie of the Year, but he's one of the finalists for Rookie of the Year, Xavier Watts, and Morrison the year before, that year also. So he's done a good job of developing DBs, and bringing in 2 5-stars this year was really great for him. And he left them with the cupboard full because they brought in some really good DBs, not just the 2 guys, but they have 3 others that are outstanding. So he did a real good job, and I think they'll continue that. So I think the jury's still out on linebackers because Al Golden had done a real good job with Asa and Madden Reardon. And then they lost Golden a year ago, and then they lost their linebacker coach this year. So I think that's the jury. They've got some really good linebackers, but now is the new guy going to be able to recruit? And only time will tell.
Tom, I'm curious. You mentioned Aaron Henry coming over from Illinois as a defensive backs coach earlier. What do you think how different is it to recruit for a program like Notre Dame than to recruit for a program like Illinois? Is there an adjustment period that he will have to get used to in terms of making that transition?
I think Notre Dame recruits the elite of the elite. Illinois doesn't. They got to try to find diamonds in the rough or guys that they think are going to really have developed and people haven't found out yet. So I think what he's got to do, and I don't think Aaron's been at one of the premier programs. So I think, yes, he has to adjust to going after the great players and not worry about 3 stars, worry about 5 stars. Go after every single one. And if you could land 1 a year, or you could do 2 like Mickens did this year, more power to you. But I think he's got to adjust. Partridge has to, all 3 of them, the new guys have to adjust to Notre Dame, battling Alabama, Ohio State, Georgia, USC, Oklahoma, Miami for the top players.
Tom, it seems like more and more guys that are not the main position coaches are factoring into recruiting. And the one I really want to draw attention to is Tre Reader, who just seems like he's got such a bright future. All of a sudden, he was such a big factor, even with Max Bola's recruiting. I wonder if you can shine a light on Tre Reader and these guys that are kind of behind the scenes recruiters.
Now, I told Tre, I think he's going to be a full-time coach within a couple of years. He's an outstanding recruiter. He's learning under Chris Ash now, and he did learn under Al Golden and Bulla. And here's a good example of the recruiting thing. There was a linebacker who mentioned to me that he liked to hear from Notre Dame, so I texted it to Bulla, and he said, "Can you give that to Tre Reader?" So I don't think he was that involved in recruiting back then. Tre was doing a lot of the linebacker recruiting anyway, so having him on board with the new linebacker coach and working together, I think could be great, especially if they gel right away, because Tre Reader is an up-and-coming linebacker coach. You just watch; he'll be a big-time guy within a year or 2.
Tom, I'm curious from your perspective, what we talk about how different recruiting is now than say 20 years ago. Do you think the skill set of being a good recruiter as an assistant coach is different than it was 20 years ago? And if so, how different is it?
No, I don't think it's different at all. Since I've been doing it 48 years, it's always been the same. 2 things: personality and perseverance, especially with the elite schools. And you're talking about Notre Dame, as you would Ohio State, Georgia, Alabama, USC, those schools. It's about personality and perseverance, how close you get with the ball players. Notre Dame over the past, not with this current staff or not with Lou Holtz's staff for most of the time, those guys knew how to recruit. They were great. They were always on top of things. Nowadays, you got to be on top of it a little bit more. So there is a difference because you got to recruit sophomores now and juniors and seniors and build a relationship over the past couple of years. A lot of coaches are not wanting to do that. That's why they jump to the NFL, because they don't want to spend that much time talking to a 16, then 17, then 18-year-old coming to their school and kind of working on them and developing the relationships. The guys that do turn out to be great recruiters. I think I've told you this story before, and I've done it with a few other top players. But when I was in New Orleans and watching their great running back there a couple of years ago, and at the end of his sophomore year, I'm talking to the coach, and for the hour and a half I was there watching him on film, Lane Kiffin called from USC, Les Miles called from LSU, and Nick Saban called from Alabama. Guess what? They were the 3 finalists 2 years later. They had worked them. They had developed a relationship because of hard work and personality, and they were able, and he wound up going to LSU, but it came down to those 3 because they were jumping the gun on everybody else who maybe started recruiting him as a junior or even as a senior, which at that time, that's all Coach Kelly's guys were doing at Notre Dame. They'd go after mainly just at the end of his junior year, but a lot of times other schools would have a year advantage on Notre Dame, and that's why they always struggled sometimes. And not just Coach Kelly's guys, but over the years, I started when Dan Devine was head coach, and Notre Dame would always tell me, "Oh, the school recruits itself." That's a lazy statement. They go, "Yeah, the school recruits itself," while they go off and play golf. It doesn't. Notre Dame does, but a lot of the kids, and I told you before, when we did a thing for the Chicago Sun-Times, we polled 100 players and over 50 of them didn't know that Notre Dame was in Indiana. So you got to be told about Notre Dame's history. They don't know about George Gipp. They don't know about Newt Rockne for the most part. You got to tell them, and you got to tell them your graduation rate and how many of the normal students, and every student gets placed in jobs right away, and tell them about the great facilities and obviously the tradition, how many guys you put in the NFL and your 11 championships, stuff like that. And it comes down to the assistant coaches knowing a little bit. Probably when they get to Notre Dame, they got to study a little bit about the school and promote the school. And I think once they do that, then it comes down to personality and perseverance by developing that relationship. And I think most of the guys at Notre Dame now are doing that, and that's why they had such a great class coming in right now. I have them number 2. Then they did a good job in the portal. So things are looking up for Notre Dame. And I think if they can get some of these guys to get a pass rush, I think Notre Dame could win the national title this year. And I hadn't said that in years, but I do believe they've got a lot of things in place to go all the way if the defensive line gels.
Tom, you talked about Notre Dame offering guys earlier, and they have been, but I'm curious, as a recruiting analyst, how do you evaluate kids where there's so little of their development, where they have their best football still in front of them? What's the key to making those evaluations as sophomores so that you are talking to the right guys?
Yeah, 2 things. It's projection, and then you have to sit. That's why I'm on the road all the time. I try to see these guys in person and talk to them. I just saw a real good wide receiver named Upshaw at Lee County High School in South Georgia, and it's a million miles away, it seems like, off of the interstate. But I really like going to see him because he's telling me how important football is to him, and he wants to get to the NFL. I'll do whatever it takes. I'll work hard. And the coach says he's a great worker. He's got a ton of offers. Now, he also runs a 10-800 meters, and he's 6'2". So he's got all the skills to be a real good one. Because a lot of times you got to have that size that fits that position first. Then you look at the kid's heart, athletic ability, and most of all, production. Because I'm a big believer, just like Kurt Cignetti's always said. I've always said production can rule out anything else that you might have as a negative as a ball player. But if they've got great production, they're playing pretty good teams, then you know that ball player is going to be pretty good. I remember I told you before, Aaron Donald for most of the year was turned down by Notre Dame because they said he doesn't have length. And now he's a Hall of Famer, or will be a Hall of Famer. And they say that about a lot of guys. And Notre Dame they were really big with Coach Kelly's staff about length. And I like it too. But when you get a guy that's got 200 tackles and he's there all the time, and he may be a 5'11", 230-pound linebacker, I would say go after him, because you're not going to be disappointed. He's going to be a great player no matter where he winds up. Now, usually those kind of guys wind up at Indiana or Texas Tech or schools where they turn out to be really, really good. And you see that all the time because some schools, and Notre Dame can be picky. They look at defensive lineman. They love the length. He's 6'4", 6'5". He's got explosive moves, everything else. But he's only got a sack or 2 and takes a couple of plays off. Those guys hardly ever change. They're going to be the same way in college. And you say, well, I thought he was going to make it. But they don't make it because they don't have the heart. If you don't have the heart in high school, for the most part, and there's a few exceptions, but if you don't have the heart in high school, you're going to go to college and find some reasons not to have a great career.
Tom, go ahead, Eric.
No, you go ahead, Tyler.
I'm a short timer as it relates to covering recruiting compared to you, but I've now covered recruiting going into 15 years now, and it's changed a lot. In mostly the biggest way I would say would be as it relates to the coaches is now there's less area recruiting and it's more position recruiting. Like if you're a cornerbacks coach at Notre Dame, you're recruiting corners across the country. You're not maybe in charge of recruiting Cincinnati or something like that, where there were more of those instances 15 years ago. I'm curious, does that make it that more important to be a good evaluator of your position if you are an assistant coach now in terms of recruiting?
Yeah, because you got no excuse. And I've talked to Eric about this too, Tyler, you got Nick Saban or Urban Meyer, the great recruiters. If you don't do your job within a couple of years, they're firing you. Nick had such a great turnover that a lot of it came down because they weren't great recruiters, and Nick had to have them that way. And now that they're recruiting their own position, they got no excuse. Hey, so-and-so had seen him before. I just saw him lately. Now they go after all the ball players. And I've talked to guys in the past. They've always said, like George Kelly always recruited Chicago. And I would always talk to him either positive or negatively about some of the guys. Rob Ianello had Chicago. Tommy Clements had Chicago. Bob Davie and Dave Roberts had split Chicago one year. And all these guys would come to my house, all the schools would, watching film. And I remember Dave Roberts, who signed half of that great 94 team by himself. But Bob Davie was there. He asked me to call Oklahoma and UCLA to see, call their ADs to see if he can get the job. This when he got there. He never got one guy in 2 years. But then they gave him the head coaching job. That was a horrible move by whoever was in charge of Notre Dame and bringing him in, because Jerry DiNardo would have been better. Tommy Clements would have been better. Not that I have anything against Davey, but he screwed things up.
Some people would say a house plant would have been better, but keep going.
Yeah, and then Tyrone comes in. Tyrone is a super nice guy, but he brings in a real bad recruiting staff, guys that initially would go after B-list guys. Most guys go after B-list guys at Notre Dame at the end of recruiting when you're just trying to fill out a class. But in my mind, it always seemed they were going after B-list guys right from the beginning, except for that one great class that he had, and a lot of reasons for it. You know, Zibikowski and Brady Quinn and Greg Olson and John Carlson and Trevor Laws and Ryan Harris, John Sullivan, who is related to Newt Rockne. They got Victor Abiamari and Ambrose Wooden that year because Victor had been caught taking money from Maryland after they had committed, the uncommitted, and then Notre Dame kind of fell into Notre Dame's lap. So it was a bit, I would say, of smoke and mirrors that year, because after that they wound up having 2 horrible years, the years that set them on the path to being just an average team, which had happened before when Lou Holtz had lost Vinny Serrato, and the admissions office at Notre Dame wasn't letting them bring a lot of guys in. Holtz had 2 average years at the very end when they kind of pushed him out and wanted Davey in there. And I saw the same thing happen. So now it really looks like as long as Marcus is happy at Notre Dame, then Notre Dame's going to always recruit well, because he himself is a good recruiter. And I think he demands it out of his assistant coaches, or at least he should be. And it looked like he did this past year. When you go down, Rudolph did a good job at offensive linemen. And Mike Denbrock, who really doesn't have to recruit that much because he's offensive coordinator, he brought in 2 great tight ends. So linebackers, okay. Wide receivers, Mike Brown did a very good job this year, which is great. So, and quarterback, Gino is one of the better quarterback coaches in the country, and he's done a real good job. I was down seeing their offer for 2027 because he moved up a year. And his name's Champ Munds, M-O-N-D-S, from Vero Beach. And Jesus, he's something. 6'3", 230, ran a 4.5, over 600 yards, I think, rushing, almost 3,000 yards passing. Led him to the state title game. Guess who they lost to? Grubbs. When Grubbs kind of wound up and threw the ball from 45 to the 5-yard line, and they got that miracle catch, or else Vero Beach and Munds would have won the state title. But I know Gino is really excited about him, and he mentioned Notre Dame to me as one of his top 5 schools at the time. So, and Gino will stay on top of him. And I would imagine Notre Dame's got to offer 4 or 5 quarterbacks this year, because that's the best way to do it. You're never sure of one until you get that one. And so that quarterback position's in good hands. Jawan Seidler, I think, is one of the better recruiters I've seen. He may have lost the running back from Pennsylvania to Georgia, but I think it was more NIL than it was him losing him. But there's some other really good backs out there. You could almost guarantee that Jawan's going to bring in a couple of outstanding running backs.
Tom, we don't know all the states you've gone to on this trip, but you're going to let us know in a second. I just from what you've said, I figure you've seen a lot of Waffle Houses and Crystals, but the states that you've been to, can you tell us what they are? And then what's the lay of the land as far as Notre Dame? What are kids saying about Notre Dame in those states?
I was, in North Carolina, which Notre Dame has had great success the last couple of years. I had a big thing a week ago Saturday, but because they had a massive storm, 3 a.m. the night before that Friday, I had to cancel all 70 guys, text them, text their coaches, text their parents, said I'll set it up again for May. So I missed North Carolina. I did go in to see Josh Dotson, who's down in Huff High School the day before I had to cancel it. And then I headed into Florida, and I saw just about every top player except the players that IMG does not let people in unless there's a tournament going on. It's almost, I always worry why they're like that, but I couldn't see the IMG, but I saw everybody else in the state. And I was really impressed. Cardinal Mooney has a head coach who's from Notre Dame, Jarrard Clark, who played there. They got some really good. They got a quarterback who I think might be one of the best quarterbacks I've seen in the country. 6'7". He's got an outstanding arm, great athlete named Davidson, and he's good. Venice High School's got a 2028 quarterback also. So I think Gino's going to be very busy in Florida. Those are the really top guys. But Champ Munds is the best quarterback either year, 27, 28. I know some people have got the guy from IMG rated higher, but he's not as good as Champ Munds. You can almost tell he's good, but not that good. Champ Munds, I think, is going to be a Heisman candidate by his sophomore year in college. He's that good. And then I'm in Georgia now. I just was at Lee County. A coach brought out 7 players. I've got the top 100 players in Georgia meeting me Saturday. So I'm gonna be busy from like 6 a.m. until about 2 or 3 p.m. interviewing and taking pictures of all the guys, because it looks like the entire state's coming out. Teddy Jarrard's dad called me yesterday, and he was going to come out just to say hi, because he's no longer a guy that I'm going to write about because he's heading into college. But Walton's got a brother who's outstanding. He'll be there, and Teddy Jarrard's younger brother is going to be there, along with everybody Notre Dame's offered in Georgia will be there. So I'll have a better handle on it once I see all the players. And obviously it's one of the 4 best states in the country, along with California, Texas, and Florida. So I'll have my hands. So and then I go into Nashville, and I have all the top players meeting at the Parthenon across the street from Vanderbilt, which is it's built just like the Parthenon in Greece, almost the same size, and it's a museum. So it's great. And I use it as a good backdrop for pictures. So I've been around, and before I got every part of the country east of the Mississippi already done. And then I've got a month where I travel west. Texas is already done, but everything else I bounce around. And that's a lot of driving, because there's very few players in New Mexico. Arizona, mainly concentrated in the Phoenix area. Then I have San Diego State. I have Sean Lewis and Caleb Davis, who was at Notre Dame last year, is in charge of their recruiting. So I'll put a get together there, and then possibly at USC with Chad Bowden. And then I'll go up to Cal Berkeley. We have all the guys in Northern California. Oregon's got maybe 5 guys I'd be interested in. Then up in Seattle by the University of Washington, I cut down to BYU, over to Colorado, where I see my old buddy Deion Sanders, then over to Omaha, Nebraska, and then Kansas City and home. And I've seen almost everybody except spring game at Wisconsin on the 18th of January. I'll have all the kids from Minnesota and Wisconsin there. So and I'll have the whole country done by the 18th of January.
January?
I mean April. See, I've lost a lot of my brain cells now because I'm on the road too much.
I thought I had lost some. I thought, wait a second, isn't it February?
Yeah, I have no idea where I'm at right now. I'm just automatically, the car just takes me to my next interview.
Okay, have you stopped at a Waffle House or not? That's all.
No Waffle House, but twice I was at Cracker Barrel, 2 Cracker Barrels. And my brother, who is a lieutenant in the police force in Marietta, Georgia, sharpshooting expert of the state of Georgia. After I do this big interview Sunday, his wife, and my brother Timmy and I are going to go to another Cracker Barrel in Marietta. So I do like Cracker Barrel. I like the atmosphere of the place.
We're gonna have to get you to rate all the different Cracker Barrels you've been to by the time your trip's done with.
Well, Tyler, and I do have Waffle Houses. The recruiting guy, they call him, Richard Davenport from Arkansas, they're big guy there. I meet him at the Waffle House every year we get to Little Rock. And then I do it also with Ronnie Cottrell, former recruiting coordinator at Florida State, Alabama. He's now a coach in the Mobile area. And him and I, wherever there's a Waffle House near Alabama, you'll see Ronnie and I at least once a year.
Tom, you've mentioned the quarterbacks. Obviously, Notre Dame brought in Noah Grubbs, who's on campus now as an early enrollee. Teddy Jarrard's coming in the summer. Both those guys will be given chances to compete for the backup quarterback job. How would you describe them in terms of who's more likely to be the backup quarterback? Who's more maybe college ready between the two?
It's a good question, because Grubbs is going to have a head start.
Right.
I would say Jarrard. Jarrard might have more potential. He's got a great arm. I saw him a year ago, January, and I was really impressed with Teddy. But I think Grubbs, because the competition there, they play good competition too. He might be a little bit ahead right now, but I think in the long run, it could be Teddy Jarrard. And then if that happens, whoever gets it, one of them will probably leave. That seems to be what happens in college football nowadays. Quarterbacks don't want to hang around to compete. They want to be guaranteed a job. And obviously CJ has that job now. And if he has the kind of year some people even predicted him to win the Heisman. If he does, he may leave early. He's got it 3 years in after this coming season. And if that's the case, maybe one of them won't leave, because those are the two. Well, he got the kid from Boston also there, who was committed to Clemson, and then he wound up going to Notre Dame. And he's got some talent too. But I do think that Teddy Jarrard might be the more talented of the trio.
Tom, the last one from me before we get Tyler, I'm sure has another one. We want to get all your information, how people can find your products and so forth. But the last one from me that has to do with football is your recollections. Lou Holtz's name has been out there this week because of his condition and so forth. Wonder what your memories are of him as a recruiter, and would he have been as successful if Vinny Serrato ended up playing hockey and not being a recruiting coordinator?
No, he wouldn't have been that successful. Holtz was a great coach, but he did not like recruiting. A lot of people don't even know that, but I've heard, I knew some stories that some of the assistants would tell me. I even think I don't know, he made too many. I know he made a home visit to Jerome, and he was mad about that year because Bo had been to Jerome's house 3 times. And that was the great year, the class of 90, which almost everyone wound up in the NFL with 2 Hall of Famers and 5 first-round picks. And Vinny did the bulk of that work. People don't realize that Vinny Serrato was fantastic. As soon as he got there, he wasn't a coach. So the rule, Bill Reese had started that with UCLA when I first met him in '79. And then he was the only guy doing it for a while. But Vinny, starting in '85, started doing it. He wasn't the recruiting coordinator. Minnesota, Holtz had a guy, I think, had some health problems. Let's just say that. He left during the season, and Holtz named Vinny as recruiting coordinator with no experience. So I started talking to Vinny right away while he was at Minnesota about, rules and stuff like that. And we wound up talking almost every day for 6 years, and he was fantastic with the players. He was close to their own age anyway. He had played at Minnesota hockey and football. Mac Brown was his wide receiver coach at Iowa State. And so Vinny knew that he just never coached, but being on the road almost the whole year, it finally stopped around 85 or so. I mean, around 90 or 91, Joe Paterno stopped it because Notre Dame was beating him on almost all of his top guys. He didn't like it. So Joe Paterno, as always, got a lot of the rules passed by him. He also got that rule passed that head coaches couldn't be at the kids' houses on signing day. The first year of that rule, Joe Paterno was caught in one of the great linebacker, Quintus McDonald's house. And he said, "Oh my God, I forgot the rule," even though he's the one that pushed it through. So there was a lot of that stuff going on with the recruiting. No one was as good as Vinny Serrato, and Notre Dame fans, most of them know it if they were around at that time, but you could talk to the players. Holtz was a great coach, and he was great in the house. I sat in on some of the houses in Chicago, and Holtz would do magic tricks. His personality, his mind was fantastic. He knew everything about Notre Dame. Even I sat in with Jeff Pearson, and because Jeff's dad was my boxing coach when I was 12 years old, him and a famous boxer, and he invited me over to the house, and I was shocked at how much Holtz knew about Notre Dame. That was his first day ever on the road. He went and saw Pearson, John Foley, and Paul Glonick that day, and he knew everything about Notre Dame. Like I say, some of the guys have to maybe need to go to a class to learn about the school, but Holtz obviously grew up as a big Notre Dame fan because he knew so much about it.
Obviously, you're out on the road traveling, putting together your prep football report. When will you finalize that report, and how can folks get their hands on it when you're done with it?
Well, this year's already out, and the wrap-up issues have been out. I put it out in mid-January. So the next one will be out in the summer with all the top seniors in the country. Then there's an underclass magazine, which comes out the next month after that. So I try to cover everybody. And they could just go to TomLemmingPrepFootball.com or Lemming Report, and they can find out how to get the magazines.
All right, Tom, as always, we appreciate you joining us, and safe travels on the road ahead.
Okay, guys, take care. Talk to you later.
Why haven't you subscribed to BlueandGold.com yet? We have all the Notre Dame intel, analysis, and compelling stories that you need. New subscribers can give us a try for just $1. Use the link in our video description or podcast description, or find the join button on the BlueandGold.com homepage. All right, now it's time for questions. You can submit questions to us on Twitter or the loose emoji board before every podcast. I'm at TJamesND, and Eric's at eHansenND. First one I have for us, Eric, is from at Charles W. Wolf. I keep thinking about how much recruiting and undergraduate transfers have changed in recent years at Notre Dame. Do you think the team is shopping in a different aisle more because of Coach Freeman's efforts, or a more accommodating approach from the university? I'm happy with both.
The shopping from a different aisle was a quote from Brian Kelly. during his time. And so I'm not sure if you're making reference to that or it's a different kind of shopping down the aisle. But let me answer the question this way. I'm probably going to give you, I'm not going to land in your multiple choice or your either or thing here. For me, I think that Marcus Freeman has leaned into what makes Notre Dame different instead of trying to camouflage it. And that's in his mantra of choose hard. And he really hits the, here's what Notre Dame can do, life after football. And it's going to be hard here. You're going to have to work for it. And so I think that helps Notre Dame when they recruit guys to retain them, that there's not this culture shock of, wait, I didn't realize it was going to be this cold, this hard. It's kind of baked into the recruiting pitch. I also think Marcus Freeman looks at guys that are what you call out of profile for Notre Dame. And what I mean by that is players that go to schools that Notre Dame doesn't typically draw a lot of kids from for its student body. So he's willing to kind of go outside of that as long as they kind of fit the, hey, I want to make something in my life after football. As far as what the administration is doing, I can never remember a time when the wind was at a coach's back as much as it is for Marcus Freeman, but he deserves a lot of credit, not for necessarily fighting for it, but for finessing it and saying, here's what we need from you. And we're still going to hit the Notre Dame academic mission hard. So it's not like we're asking for you to lower the bar. What we're asking for you is to maybe be creative in ways where we could make this work. And Tyler James is not going to give us this answer because he was so overwhelmed at my answer.
I keep muting myself because I'm a little under the weather, so I keep coughing and stuff, and then I forgot to mute myself. My apologies. I think if you squint hard, like choose hard and shopping down a different aisle aren't that different of like a strategy, right? Like, no, I think it's packaged different, and I think Marcus Freeman has embraced it in a way that, yes, we are different at Notre Dame. You come here for different reasons than you would going elsewhere. And you are embracing the challenge that we were presenting you at Notre Dame. And that's what Brian Kelly was doing, maybe in a less tactful way when he's saying we're shopping down a different aisle in terms of trying to find guys that can fit at Notre Dame and those kinds of things. I do think Marcus Freeman has been aggressive in maybe going down different aisles that maybe aren't, that are at guys that are at schools that maybe don't typically produce Notre Dame student athletes or students in general. And I think Brian Kelly during his tenure got some scars from that, because it's interesting when you look at, like, we could compare this 2026 class historically to the best classes of the internet era. You find classes from the Brian Kelly tenure that have guys that didn't necessarily pan out at Notre Dame, but were highly lauded as recruits. And was that because they couldn't make it at Notre Dame, or why did they maybe not pan out at Notre Dame? I think that's interesting. And I think that's something that maybe shaped the way Brian Kelly recruited later in his years at Notre Dame. I don't think Marcus Freeman has that. And I don't think that he will be spurned off of that, in part because of the success he is having and will likely continue to have in recruiting. So I think Marcus Freeman deserves a lot of credit for that, packaging it the right way, understanding what needs to be recruited to as it relates to Notre Dame. And then, yeah, the undergraduate transfer part of it, like, that's, yes, Marcus Freeman, I'm sure, is doing some things to nudge Notre Dame in the right direction as it relates to that. But Notre Dame had to come to that decision on its own, the academic side of things, to say, hey, we have to be able to accommodate things here in order for our football program to have this kind of success. And Marcus Freeman is the kind of coach that we're willing to do that kind of thing for. All right, next question is from AB10 on the loose emoji board. Does Brian Jean-Marie's resume make you skeptical of the potential hire? I know Freeman deserves our trust, but that aside.
I'm not sure what the red flags are that you're talking about, or potential red flags. So I'm probably not going to answer the question well enough because I don't know what the concern is in the resume. When I look at his resume, I see a guy that has a lot of experience, that has defensive coordinator experience, recruiting coordinator experience, and has coached in some bright lights at Texas, Tennessee, Michigan. And so from that standpoint, I don't see the concern. I know Tyler's done a deeper dive into his recruiting, the recruiting mechanics. I think what's hard sometimes with position coaches, and we've talked about this on the pod before, is sometimes you don't get a real clear picture of who they are because so much is incumbent on the head coach and the coordinator and where they happen to be. So I'm open-minded to this. I guess I trust Marcus in this. I listened to a few interviews with Brian, and he's a guy that does a lot of coach speak and so forth, but so did Mike Mickens. I mean, Mike Mickens is a different guy when he's coaching and when he's recruiting than when he's talking to the media. He wasn't a guy that won a lot of press conferences with us. He was a nice guy, and you knew he knew his stuff, but he wasn't giving you much. And so, I'm optimistic about this. There was nothing on his resume that really screamed a red flag to me. So,
yeah, I would be curious what AB10 thought were the resume question marks. I think if we're nitpicking, the things that stood out to me in terms of his resume was that it doesn't seem like he's an overwhelmingly successful recruiter, especially in recent years as it relates to his time at Michigan and Tennessee. Not recruiting a ton of 4-star or higher recruits in those years. And then he hasn't coached an eventual NFL draft pick since 2020. But that I think will change here in April when one or two of his Michigan linebackers will probably get drafted. Otherwise, yeah, like he's coached at a lot of different places. He has a history with Charlie Strong, coaching on his staffs. He's been a defensive coordinator. He's coached in the Big Ten, the SEC. So I think he checks a lot of boxes in terms of the kind of guy you would like to add as a position coach if you're Notre Dame. All right, next question is from @WolfND143. I know the offensive line has had several injuries over the last few years. However, with all the talent, they have struggled with run blocking. Can Coach Rudolph reverse course on this trend that has gone over several years?
I think the coaching staff feels like he can, and I think Joe Rudolph also thinks he can. And I do think it's a fair observation that they were not a team that could move you off the ball last year. They were really good in kind of the mid-zone game, and that's what their backs seemed to respond. Jadarian Price and Jeremiah Love responded too well. So, but they want to be a blow you off the ball type of team this year. I think if they are fully healthy, and let's say you have Gerby Lambert as a tackle, which I think is going to happen, and you have Charles Jagaza somewhere, a healthy Charles Jagaza on that offensive line, you have the makings of a blow you off the ball type of guy. Now, you should have had that with Schrouth as well, but I do think it's going to be emphasized. I think it's going to be something that we'll be watching this spring and early in training camp to see if that's going to happen. But they're going to need to be better with not having Jeremiah Love and Jadarian to kind of hit home runs, even if, it was a pitch 4 inches out of the strike zone.
Yeah,
that was a terrible analogy too. So go ahead and throw tomatoes at the screen.
I would take issue with the word struggle. I don't think Notre Dame has struggled with run blocking in general. I think it struggled last season with short yardage run blocking. I don't think Notre Dame was a dominant run blocking team last year, but I think struggling is a bit too far in my opinion. I do think Notre Dame can and will improve in terms of run blocking next season. I'd like to see, I think the potential of having Gerby Lambert at right tackle and a butt kicker like Charles Jagasa at right guard, to me, can make a big difference there, because last year your best run blockers on the offensive line, at least according to Pro Football Focus, and I would tend to agree, were on the left side with Anthony Knapp and Billy Schrouth. Just some numbers to support maybe not being struggling. PFF graded Notre Dame ranked Notre Dame number 45 in terms of run blocking last year among FBS teams, which isn't great. I would also note that 2 of the worst run blockers on Notre Dame's offense were the tight ends. Better blocking from its tight end positions to help out with the run blocking. And so do you blame Joe Rudolph for that? sure, I think that's fine. He influences those tight ends and works with them as well. But if you go back previously in 2024, they were tied for 18th in run blocking grade. They were 30th in 2023. That's not struggling to me. In terms of rushing offense, Notre Dame was a top 30 team in each of the last 3 seasons, top 15 in terms of yards per carry. So I would struggling in terms of run blocking seems a bit harsh. And I think I understand the expectations are high.
The expectations are high.
Rightfully so, but that's not what struggling looks like. All right, next question is from ND_discussion. Who will be the most exciting player to watch on offense this year other than CJ Carr?
Oh, there's a bunch of them. For me, I usually go for guys that are more unknown than known when I get these kind of questions. So I'm going to pick out some lesser known in terms of their production this far in their career. I'm really curious what Kedron Young turns into when he's healthy. I think the coaching staff is really excited about how he might fit into that backfield coming off of ACL surgery. He's a big back with a lot of speed, over 240 pounds. And when you see his picture, you're like, where are the 240 pounds? If that's what 240 looks like, I need to be 240 because we're about the same height. And then I'm really curious about the Ohio State transfers, Quincy Porter and Mylan Graham. I just am very, very excited about them. I'll throw a fourth one in there. So I didn't narrow it down. I'll let Tyler narrow it to one and answer the question properly. But I really think James Flanagan has a bright future. I think he's going to be the starter. I think Tyler thinks it's going to be Cooper Flanagan. I think they're going to be great tandem. I think you're going to see Notre Dame be able to show all kinds of gears. I think they're going to be able to go 4 wide, and they're also going to be able to bully you with the multiple tight ends too. So James Flanagan is part of that.
Yeah, and getting back to the last question, I think Cooper Flanagan and James Flanagan can be better blockers than Jarrard and Washington were last season, and I think that could help Notre Dame in the run game. If I have to pick one guy, I would pick Aeneas Williams. I feel like that's the chalk answer from my perspective. I think he's a very talented running back. Last season may have pushed people towards forgetting that because he didn't do as much as he did as a freshman, but I think he's a very talented running back. The hopeful answer that I would give is Quincy Porter. I think there's a hope and desire for him to be an exciting player, and I think that is certainly possible this season. But in terms of who I feel the most comfortable with, I'd probably do Aeneas Williams. And as an offensive line aficionado, if Charles Jagasa can get back to being healthy and being himself, I think he's an exciting player to watch as well. All right, Rockney 1988 on the loose emoji board asks, how much does the running game drop off losing Price and Love? Not knocking Williams because he's been pretty good when he played, but I guess it really depends on Nolan James and Kedron Young, if 100% healthy, and the 2 freshmen pitching in. Running back by committee, possibly, ?
I think the running backs are going to be really good. I think what we might not get is the home runs as often, although when you look at Aeneas Williams, and again, some of these were mop-up situations, some of them weren't. He has a incredible frequency for touchdowns to touches.
Yeah.
And so, maybe with more exposure, that won't be quite as much. But you look at his stats just in a smaller sample size, you go, maybe this guy will be really special. The other thing is I think the offensive line is going to be better. And I think the passing game around the running game is going to be more dangerous. So maybe you get the home runs from the passing game, and it'll open up things for the run because teams are going to have to say, wow, I don't know if we can put a safety in the box to stop the run with these kind of receivers. So I do think the running game will be very productive.
Yeah. Even if, say, you don't have a clear-cut number 2 running back and no one really elevates themselves next season, which I don't necessarily anticipate that being the end result. But even if that is the case, if Aeneas Williams is good, then Notre Dame's going to have a good running game because of everything else around them. Like maybe it won't be an elite running game like it was last season with Love and Price, but I think Notre Dame can still have a very good running attack without having 2 of the best running backs in college football. I think there's talent there in Kedron Young and Nolan James Jr. And I really like the freshman duo of Javian Osborne and Jonas Walton. So I think there's potential there. As Eric mentioned, the help of the offensive line and the passing game should matter. So yes, there will be a drop off, especially in the home run hitting ability of the running game. But I do think that Notre Dame still has plenty of horses to be good in the running game this coming season. All right, next question is from JPMC on the loose emoji board. Who are your starting 3 wide receivers and top 2 running backs?
I'm going to go with starting 4 wide receivers because I think the 4 at the top of the rotation are going to play a lot, and I think you're going to see some 4 wide. So I'm going to go with Jordan Faison, and I think Jordan may play some slot receiver. Jaden Greathouse, I think he's going to have a really good bounce back year. And then the 2 guys from Ohio State, Quincy Porter and Mylan Graham. I think they could be starters on a lot of teams, and I think they will be starters on this team. I think those 4. As far as 1, 2 in the running backs, Aeneas Williams is the gimme. That's the gimme putt. The longer putt, I'm going to say Kedron Young coming off the ACL, but I could see any of those 4 guys. I think the freshmen are really talented, and I think Nolan James Jr., he didn't have the star power in recruiting, but I know the coaching staff really likes him.
Yeah, if I have to choose 3 instead of the 4 wide receivers, I would probably eliminate Mylan Graham from the 4 that you mentioned. But if they decide, you know what, let's put Faison in the slot and let Mylan Graham play to the field, I could see that happening. I think right now, I think Jaden Greathouse is probably your best slot, but I think that could change depending on how Notre Dame sees fit. So I think I would have Porter, Greathouse, and Faison as my starting 3, and then the running backs, same as Eric Aeneas Williams and Kedron Young, I think. And I also agree that it could have been any of those 4 younger guys that could surge into that number 2 spot.
It's going to be hard to play man against those 4 receivers.
Yeah, AB 10 on the loose emoji board. Adding on to that, who are your 6 wide receivers, top 6 wide receivers in order?
So I need to number the 4 that I already did. Is that
I would suppose because it's in order.
Well, I'm going to go with Jordan Faison because he's the most proven, and he's been very productive, and he's always kind of exceeded everybody's expectations. And now he's not playing lacrosse, so he's number 1 for me. 2, we're not going to see, I think, Quincy Porter in the spring, but I'm going to put Quincy number 2. I'm going to put Greathouse 3 and Graham 4. But I think there's going to be very little difference in those guys in terms of their production. Mm-hmm. Maybe Faison because of the familiarity with Carr, and maybe it takes Quincy Porter a little bit longer to get going if he's not in spring. And then at 5 and 6. So this is people that I think will play, not who has the highest upside. So I would go Micah Gilbert as the 5. I think that's easy. And then when you get to the 6, it's a real crapshoot. It could be anybody from Cam Williams to Caden Finley. I'm going to go with Cam Williams as a wild card pick with Finley as my fallback. So he's 6B.
All right, well, we're the same 1 through 5. 6, the 2 I wrote down weren't the 2 you mentioned. I had Logan Saldate and Elijah Burris as the 2 potential guys there for the 6
those
guys.
Those are good. Those are good picks.
Yeah. So I think it's anyone's guess who sort of emerges there, and I think it could also be reflective of what are the roles that the Faison, Greathouse, Graham sort of settle into? Do you have 1 slot receiver there and 2 field receivers? Do you have 2 slot receivers and 1 field receiver? Because then I think that opens more of the opportunity for the 6th person, and with Saldate being more of a slot and Burris being more of a field receiver. So I think either could surge ahead. I really like Elijah Burris. I thought he was underrated as a recruit. And Saldate, someone obviously has time in the system and could make a push this coming offseason. All right, Irish sports fan on the loose emoji board says, do we see more of a 3-back rotation this year or just a heavy dose of the top 2 running backs again?
I think there's a lot of potential for there to be 3. I know Jawan Sider in the past has said I can get 4 ready. And then he basically played 2 last year, but there was some value in that in playing the 2. I just think with those 3 that there is enough variety and there's enough, Keidron Young gives you something different than everybody else does. And Aeneas Williams is going to play a lot. And I mean, maybe one of the freshmen are a home run hitter with their speed, like Osborne. So I could definitely see it being a bigger rotation.
Yeah, it feels like something that I feel like I need to see it before I believe it. But it definitely feels like there's the talent there for Notre Dame to be able to do that. It's just something that, with us being new to following Jawan Sider and what he did at Notre Dame this past season and then the previous year at Penn State. Now, obviously, those are unique situations in terms of having 2 clear top 2 backs, where maybe you don't have 2 clear top 2 backs this coming season. So I think there's a chance that the do get to the 3-back rotation, but I would maybe side towards 2 until we see it. All right, next question is from Marie Biafore at Biafore_Marie. Which incoming freshmen are each of you most excited to see in the spring?
There's a big list for me, and some of the ones that I'm most excited to see are actually coming in June, or in that little subset, that tiny little subset that's coming in June. I would say Joey O'Brien, just because he's so unique in terms of a 6'6" guy playing safety, and could he be a 2-way player at some point? That's fun for me to speculate about, even if it's never going to happen. It's fun to think about that. So Joey O'Brien would be my guy.
All right. Well, since Marie said freshman instead of freshman, I came up with a list of 5.
Good. I'll copy off your list.
So I included Rodney Dunham, Aiden Pouncey, cornerback, Dunham being a defensive end, running back Javian Osborne, safety Joey O'Brien, and wide receiver Caden Finley. Caden Finley, I've been calling him incorrectly by his first name for a while. But I think, like, at a number of those spots, I think there's someone else at their positions that you could include there. You could include Ebenezer Iwatade as a freshman defensive end, Kari Adams at cornerback. I just think I went with Pouncey just because I think, well, maybe he could be a nickel too, more than Kari Adams could. So that's why I'm a little bit more intrigued to see what Aiden Pouncey can do this spring. Flip a coin whether you like Javian Osborne or Jonas Walton more at running back. I really like Bubba Frazier as a wide receiver. He's a smaller guy, so I think it might be harder for him to get into the rotation because of what Notre Dame already has in terms of wide receivers. But I think there's a lot of speed and explosiveness in his game. So a lot of guys to be excited about. I know I'm working on a feature on Ian Premer, the incoming tight end who won't be joining to the summer. I think there's a lot of reason to be excited about what he brings to Notre Dame too.
Yeah, the quarterbacks, Elijah Golden, defensive tackle. There's just a lot to be excited and kind of want to get a look at. Even the kicker, Mike Singer will love that. Micah Drescher.
All right, next question is from another one from Irish Sports Fan on the Loose Emoji board. Who are your guys' 2 sleepers for the 2026 season? 2 players that no one seems to be discussing that are going to have a big impact. No specialists allowed.
See, I never know who else is discussing things because I don't really hang out with other sports writers that much.
But even so, like, we have 4 guys that cover the team basically year round, and like, so
yeah, but we talk about everybody. We're talking about whether the 3rd string offensive tackle has a hangnail.
I know that's what makes sleepers hard.
Yeah. So I will say, is Keidron Young? I mean, is that too obvious? Is he not a sleeper enough coming off an injury? Okay, I probably, judging by your face, I need to pick somebody else. Will Black's not going to be a sleeper. I'm going to say Will Black is going to start.
Okay.
So I'll go with that. And then on defense, boy, there's not a lot of opportunities. I'm going to go with why don't you pick somebody while I'm thinking about defense? I'm sure it's great radio podcasting for me to say, I don't know, I'm thinking.
I won't help you on the defense because I have two offensive names, and I try to go deep because of the difficulty in deciding who a sleeper is. So I said wide receiver Devin Fitzgerald, an incoming freshman that I just mentioned two freshmen I'm excited to see, and I didn't include him. So I guess that would qualify him as a sleeper in my opinion. And then Chris Tarek on the offensive line. Maybe there's a world where he ends up having a big offseason and is a starting guard or something like that. Like maybe that's something that I'm not predicting that to happen. But when you're asking me to predict a sleeper, there's even on the offensive line, we talk about all these guys that are competing for jobs. So it's hard to find someone that you would say, well, that would qualify as a sleeper.
Yeah, I think you mentioned him in your freshman you want to see. I would put Pouncey as a sleeper just because there's not a clear define. Is he a safety? Is he a corner? Is he a nickel? I think he is really probably underrated. Was he close to being a 5-star, Tyler?
Yeah, he was just outside. I think he was number 34 if my memory serves.
I'm going to put my money on Pouncey.
Yeah, he ended up being the number 34 overall recruit in the Rivals rankings of the 2026 class.
When Marcus jumps out and mentions somebody without him being asked about, that gets my attention.
All right, we have a couple of questions left geared towards you, Eric. First one's from Marie Biafore. Could you share a couple of your favorite Lou Holtz stories? I know you asked Tom Lemming about that. What do you have any Lou Holtz stories that come to mind?
They're not like, he was always so funny. He has a lot of funny stories. I didn't cover him on a daily basis except one spring where we are transitioning to a new beat writer, and I wasn't going to be it. I didn't want to be it at that time. I had 2 small children, and I just didn't feel like I was going to be able to be a really good dad and be the Notre Dame beat writer at that point in my life. But in that spring, I had never seen Bettis in practice before. And I said, wow, coach, is he faster than I think he is? And Lou goes, I don't know if he's faster than you think he is, or people just aren't in a real hurry to get to him, because he would run over people. The other thing about Holtz was when you interviewed him after a spring practice, he would insist on getting on this golf cart, driving back to his office, and you doing the interview while you were on the golf cart, and then you'd finish it up at his office. Well, the problem is you couldn't write anything down because he's going over all these bumps. And in your tape recorder, all you hear is the wind. And so I would give him throwaway stupid questions until the golf cart stopped. But the one thing that Lou Holtz did that I don't think a lot of people that are Tyler's age and younger remember is Notre Dame football was dead under Jerry Faust. It was never coming back. And Gene Corrigan hired Lou Holtz. Gene Corrigan wanted to fire Jerry Faust before the 5 years. And the administration said, we have a rule at that point that we have to give a coach 5 years. And Gene goes, fair enough. We'll make Jerry the best coach he can be for a couple more years. And Gene Corrigan wasn't Notre Dame's athletic director very, very long, but 2 home runs, Muffet McGraw and Lou Holtz. And Lou Holtz changed everything. And it was exciting. And Notre Dame was back. And, after the Holtz era, it took a long time to get back to that level. And Notre Dame's finally there again. And it's really exciting to be covering the team now.
All right. Yeah. And I'll just add that it was obviously an honor to have him on our podcast last fall. That was a really cool experience to be able to talk to him and see how sharp he still is. And that was very fun. I'm very grateful that Eric was persistent. He had been talking about trying to get Lou Holtz on the podcast for a while, and he came through, and it was a great opportunity. And I hope everyone has listened to that. If they haven't already, go back and find that on our channel. All right. Our last question is from Justin Zumbrun. I believe Justin is a first-time podcast question asker, so thanks for submitting a question, Justin. At Justin Z8022. Eric, you're one of the best question askers I have ever seen. How did you get so good at asking really good questions?
Well, I was a single dad and had 2 kids, so I always kind of had to find out who broke the lamp. Um, but in terms of like with sports writing, I think having to cover Bob Knight, the Indiana basketball coach, who, if you're young, is a very bombastic kind of character and didn't really like the media that much. And I learned a lot in terms of how not to put too much into the question, how to frame a question so that they weren't offended or they got hung up with part of the question. What a lot of people were, where Bob Knight would jump on him, was they wanted to give their analysis and then ask him his question, kind of box him in.
Mm-hmm.
He didn't like that. And they'd say something about point guard. What's a point guard? He'd go fire back at him. And if you asked him, how much of it was their offense and how much of it was your defense, the failing, he would do the percentages out to like 11 points, and they would add up to 100. It'd be like, well, it was 72.3584, on our defense and so forth. But that was really good training in terms of leaving questions open-ended too. You didn't kind of force them into a yes/no question, because he'd only give you yes or no. If you asked a yes or no question, you're getting one or the other. You weren't getting an expansive answer. And so that training early on was helpful.
Yeah, and I feel like I've probably learned from Eric in terms of being at so many press conferences with him during my career. Yeah, I think just trying to be genuine and being curious, and don't. This isn't. You're not trying to be the expert when you're the one asking the questions. You're trying to get an expert answer from the person you're asking questions. So, one thing I try to do is just try to ask something that isn't always asked about. Like I asked about Marcus Freeman about the scout team offensive line, and he gave a great answer, because no one ever asks about the scout team offensive line, and so it ended up being interesting. It could have been a terrible answer, but that's why we get more shots up and get asked more questions at the next press conference. So Brian Kelly certainly isn't to the extent of Bobby Knight, but he made it clear sometimes if he didn't like the way you asked a question. So I think that helps me a little bit as well. But certainly chasing Eric in that department in terms of trying to be as good of a question asker. And I have to be on my game, because I'm sitting here on a podcast all the time and we're asking questions of the same person. So I gotta make sure I'm sharp and ready to go.
Well, I appreciate that. You made a good point with the curiosity part of it, but I want to say our listeners and our people on our loose emoji board and so forth, and my live chats, you guys give me a lot of ideas for questions.
Yeah.
Knowing what you're thinking and what you're curious about, I'm like, boy, I hadn't thought about that. And so I appreciate your curiosity. It helps me with my job.
All right. Well, that is it for this week's episode of the Third and Gold podcast. It was good to catch up with Tom Lemming, as always. You can find us on YouTube, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and other podcast home. Search for Notre Dame Football with Eric Hansen and Tyler James. If you're not already subscribed to us on the proper feeds, we have plenty of written content over at blueandgold.com. So stick with us at Blue and Gold for your Notre Dame coverage needs.